So I'd like to give a very warm thanks to all of our speakers for their insightful comments into this year's report, and also for food for thought for the next report. I'm sure some of that will feed into our thinking for 2013 report. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of the IFPRI staff and our external colleagues who helped make the report possible in the first place. We will now turn to a question and answer period. We'll do it in rounds of 3 questions. If you could keep your questions brief to ensure more opportunity for others to ask. If you could also please identify yourself when you're asking a question. We are live streaming, and also this will be a podcast after the fact, so it would be helpful to identify yourself. And if you have a particular question for a particular speaker, if you could please let us know to whom the question is directed. Yes. So I'll start out with three questions, and then we'll have them answer, and we'll go back to another round. Question number 1. Right,
Hi, thank you, and congratulations on this report. I'm John Coonrod with the Hunger Project, and my question is for Schengen. I really appreciated your comment highlighting the importance of closing the gap between small-scale farmers, I think the majority of whom get no technical advice whatsoever, and the research agenda. And the calls for more research always makes me worry about that when that gap isn't being closed. I'm just wondering what trends you've seen that are positive in terms of getting good, appropriate information into the hands of small-scale farmers, particularly women. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll go right up here front. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Jonathan Wadsworth from the CGIAR Fund. Great report and fantastic comments from all the panelists. Reflecting some of the points which Andrew made at the end there, and I think also Schengen made, we are in a position, despite some of the optimism that the people have mentioned from this particular report, we are in the position, given the 2 degrees inevitability and the 4 degrees possibility this century, that many of the gains that have been mentioned in the report will be snatched back or actually, totally eliminated by emissions and climate change. So maybe this is a question for all the panelists. And coming from the CGIAR, I would really like to hear your views on how do you see the research priorities for international agricultural research and the CGIAR moving forward in the next 10, 20 years if we're going to keep the gains which we've already got? Thank you.
Simone, also we have some on this side as well. Thank you. Thanks. Microphone is heading your way. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panel. Margaret Ziegler from Global Harvest Initiative. And wanted to really commend you for the focus on productivity. It's something the Global Harvest Initiative has been kind of hammering for a couple of years, that the value of productivity is not, it's far more than production. Just wanted to touch a bit more on some of the comments that Andrew made and delve a little bit deeper into the protein demand issue. Some of our research and other research we've been looking at is indicating that there'll be at least a 40% increase in the demand for protein worldwide in the next 20 years. And I'm just wondering if the report goes into some of the needs for really improving productivity around animal care, animal health, animal production, and particularly the need for that given the impact that livestock and other animal production has on water consumption and other resource issues. So if any of the panelists would like to comment on that issue, it'd be great to hear your comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. So we'll stop for a moment and let the panel address those first 3 questions. So from John on positive trends to get information to small-scale farmers, from Jonathan on research priorities for international agricultural research moving forward, and from Margaret on protein demand and improved productivity of animal health, care, and production. If Any of you? Maybe we'll start out with Schengen, with John's question about trends on getting information.
Okay, first let me thank the three panelists, the great comments, and also the proposed research topics for IFPRI, as well as the themes for 2013 Global Food Policy Report. It's a great suggestion, recommendations. Now, the first question is how we can link smallholders better, existing knowledge, information. There are some exciting developments, particularly by using cell phones, internet, and beyond. India is setting up a lots of so-called knowledge hubs to link smallholders to these hubs through internet. IFPRI is working with NGO in India and Agriculture University in India. I think more needs to be done. So there are some successes, but more needs to be done. Under G8's leadership, the USAID has launched a program under Julie Howard's leadership on so-called ICT and agriculture. So some successes, but more needs to be done. And some of the new technologies probably will bypass some of the old institutions. So we don't need to reform the old institutions or the old technologies. Why don't we just bypass this? So I see a great opportunity there. And Jonathan, the 4-degree world is a very serious situation. So we are thinking of doing a scenario analysis of how 4-degree would affect global food security, and how CGI research can make sure that agriculture will adapt and agriculture to help to mitigate. I think Andrew made a very good point that the agriculture in the future actually accounts for the largest increase in greenhouse gas emission. So the agriculture cannot afford doing nothing. So they got to do something there. Among CGI research program, we do have a separate climate change research program, as you know. I think in the next round, or even current round, we need to make sure that climate change needs to be mainstreamed, integrated into the rest program, the rest 14 programs. Like our programs on linking agriculture to health and nutrition, our programs on policy institutions and markets. So we needed to integrate climate change into our work, not just knit the climate change program to deal with the climate change. So this is not acceptable. Now, in terms of the protein demand, the 40% more protein demand, and animal production, and related to water, climate change, we have in-house experts. John McDermott, do you want to say anything about the IRI's work, International Livestock Research? Next round. Okay, let's wait for the next round.
Okay, any of the other panelists would like to respond?
Andrew, you should come in on.
Well, on Jonathan's question about research, and by the way, Jonathan used to run research for agriculture and a lot of other areas for DFID, and so actually knows the answer to his own question much better than we do. So, look, I think in this building there is very important research in this area. It does strike me that we've lost the plot a little bit potentially on the sort of climate smart agriculture thing. Just a year ago, people like myself and many others were going around saying we really can put a ton of extra carbon in each hectare of soil in Africa, and it will be win-win-win. It will sequester carbon, it will make the soils thicker and more resilient, so it helps on adaptation, and it generates more income. And a sort of the evergreen agriculture. I think that's right. But I must say, the more we're probing, there's a lot we need to know about that, quite frankly. I mean, that's one. There's obviously a huge agenda on livestock, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I think on food waste, there's a big piece of work to be done. It may not be agriculture, but it sure affects the future of the world. And one of the things we're thinking about is, we're the keepers of what's called the greenhouse gas protocol. 81% of the Fortune 500 companies in the world report their greenhouse gas emissions using our protocol. We're thinking of doing an equivalent one for food waste. It'd be pretty interesting if every every supermarket, every food processor, everybody had to report the way they increasingly do on the. So that's one thought. Just one final issue. I'm not sure you'd call it. This is not agricultural research, but I think leading up to the post-2015 agenda, there needs to be a lot of thinking, which is going on in this building, I know, and we and many others are doing it, on how do you integrate issues of sustainability into any food and nutrition targets. We've fallen into a dreadful trap of saying, look, there are really three goals. There's the economic goals, there's the social goals, and there's the sustainability goals. And under each one, we have 14 indicators. And it enables people just to pick. I'll take 6 out of this one, but I only want 2 out of the sustainability ones, because we've got a priority. No, you've got to have them as one. And we've just written a paper for Homi Karas, who's sort of struggling. But these guys have got hard work to do if they're going to really come up with anything. I know that IFPRI's also been doing a lot of work on this.
Mary, no, you get. No, I was just going to endorse exactly what Andrew had said on integrating sustainability into anything that we dream up of a new development agenda, and you're absolutely right to say that we haven't done it. I just wanted to kind of pick up one comment from Schengen in talking about technology as a driver of particularly kind of bringing R&D to small farmers. I've always been a deep skeptic that telephonic technology in particular was going to drive Africa for a very good reason. In 1987, I wrote a long article for The Economist magazine, for which I used to work, on the burgeoning role of the private sector in the developing world that was illustrated by a picture of a Kenyan farmer on a satellite phone getting market prices and so I described, determining what to do with his planting. That was in 1987. That's 25 years ago. So we've been talking about this for quite a long time. But I am now convinced. I mean, having been a long time skeptic, that telecommunications was going to be a driver of very significant change in a whole host of development terrains. Over the last year, watching the speed with which, to take someone's point, mobile technology is leapfrogging old technology all over Africa. I now have the zeal of a convert. I mean, I was at a presentation just 2 days ago in which it was revealed that 18% of Kenya's GNP now moves entirely through mobile banking. I mean, in fact, it's not really mobile banking. It's just moves through your mobile. That's astonishing. And so after having been a skeptic for a long time, because having been burnt by my own predictions, as it were, I'm now entirely with you and think that part of the research agenda for the next few years has to look at ways in which information and telecommunications technology can really be brought to the service of those who need it most.
Thank you, Michael. Mary?
I'll just add a comment about the research agenda in a world of higher temperatures and more instability and water resource constraints, and clearly implies the need for more research and for incentives for farmers to use new technologies in their own strategies of adaptation. We did some work looking at the US last year about the value of adaptation to farmers in dealing with climate change, and looked at scenarios around plant and animal diseases and research that could mitigate those impacts, as well as drought-resistant seeds. And you do find significant impacts, but you also do have to look at the distributional impacts across different areas and different types of farms.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So we'll open up to round 2. We do have an online question, so maybe we'll take 2 over here, and then Simone, if you could read out the online question. So.
Hi, Faustine Wabwire with Bread for the World. Thank you so much, IFPRI and the entire team, for such a wonderful report. I'm really struck by a statement in this report, or maybe comes from an earlier report, but this report affirms it, that 55% of all the reduction in hunger so far I think between 1970 and 1995 can be attributed to the improvement of women in society. And I'm just wondering whether this kind of thinking or finding might be something that helps to kind of provide an impetus towards the 2015 MDG deadline and fitting into conversations around the post-2015 development agenda.
Next to John. Thanks.
John McDermott from IFPRI. I just wanted to say a little bit about the livestock question, because I think that's one that's begging for kind of research, and the analyses we have are pretty simplistic now. And I think we talked about buy-in from the low-income countries. They're not buying this overall story. And it's because it's a differentiated story. Okay, so if you're living in Zambia, where they're not producing many greenhouse gases and they rely on livestock, then it's a very different story. And there I think it's more of a win-win story. These animals are incredibly inefficient, and with some smart technologies and investments, we can make them much more efficient and get some real gains there. So I think that's one side. Then on the other side, in terms of the high-income countries, we do have an issue there that we're going to have to tackle. But I think it's a much more differentiated kind of agenda than we've tackled so far.
Thank you.
Can I? Thank you. I'm Chris Delgado, World Bank, and I think it's a comment, but really thanks to Andrew's triple win and the work of many other people here, I think that, at least at the World Bank, there's real buy-in to the idea of climate-smart agriculture. It's one of the President's 4 priorities now. The issue is, how do you actually do it? I mean, I think there's consensus on the problem, there's consensus on the potential. How do you do it? And the usual answer is something they call the landscape approach, or used to be called the watershed approach, I think. But the issue there, I mean, you have success stories. You have the Los Plateaux in China, notably. You have the Hillsides project in Rwanda. You have these, but they all involve externalities. And this is my quick comment, and it's really to IFPRI, that how you actually do it requires being able to govern a situation where everybody's better off if you do it, but there's obviously in the pathway losers and winners. And so I think that's where the research priority here, although there are many technical priorities, it's really a policy, and it's focused around externalities and a landscape approach. Thank you.
And we'll take our online question, then go to the next round afterward. Simone?
The question says, the new FAO estimate of the number of undernourished people continued to decline since 2006, despite a doubling of global grain prices. Is global hunger unaffected by food prices?
Thank you, Simone. Okay, so we have 2 questions and 2 comments for the panel. One on the role of women in society and the relation to the reduction of hunger. A comment on the question of livestock production in low-income and higher-income countries from John. From Chris, how do you do it? Climate-smart agriculture, and it will require walking a fine line. And then the online question on the declining rates of undernutrition and whatnot. So I open it up to the panel to answer however you'd like. Go ahead.
Start from Andrew.
Yep.
We reverse order this time. How about that?
Well, I guess a sort of a variant on the final question. And by the way, I agree very much with what Chris said and what John said, very much so. A variant on that question about nutrition, those who are suffering, is how did we get the numbers so wrong at the time of the crisis? I mean, I said, remember I said, we were so worried about a crisis and now we're not. It's because this says there wasn't one. I mean, this says this is what we thought happened, and in fact it didn't. And that's an astonishing fact that we got it that wrong, if we did, if the current FAO numbers are right. I mean, you must have some views on that, right? But, I mean, remember all those calculations that the World Bank did? These people were thrust into poverty, which in many ways drove many of the good things that have now happened. Now, if we'd known the truth, maybe we wouldn't have had all this emphasis on the G20 and the G8 have given. So it's a good job that they told us wrong numbers, right?
Okay.
No, I don't think I have anything to add on
I don't think I have anything to add really on this range of questions. Andrew and I were just kind of looking at this chart because it had been puzzling me too since that's this one for those of you who can see it. That it had been puzzling me too as soon the minute that I got an early copy of the report. And I don't quite know what to make of it, actually. I don't quite know what to make of it. I mean, was there really not a crisis in 07, or was there, Schengen?
Well, let me offer two comments. Firstly, even FAO new estimate has serious methodological problem. So it's not actual number who have suffered from hunger. It's estimated, simulated impact. So the data itself has problem, number one. Number two, the impact varies by country, by different groups. Why that figure didn't show decline? Because China and India had a strong economic growth. And these two countries account so large number of poor people, hungry people. So you have to look at the counterfactual. So without the food price increases, probably these two countries' poverty reduction impact will be much greater. And if you look at disaggregated data, which countries suffered because of higher food prices? Some importing countries, food importing countries in Latin America, in Africa. And obviously, many also benefited. Small producers who sell food will benefit. So some of the urban consumers, poor consumers, definitely lost. And some of the importing countries usually lose. So the impact cannot be judged using that line. Okay. And it's not a counterfactual analysis, it's a trend. Because not strong economic growth have not lots of people increase their income. Without food price spikes, probably you will see more poverty reduction or hunger reduction. And through our very disaggregated household analysis, we have seen in Ethiopia, in Bangladesh, in Ghana, net buyers of food in rural areas suffered. Women-headed households suffered. It's details. It's in details. Some of the other questions, the crazy of win-win-win, we do see some opportunities, particularly some IFPRI study. I don't know whether Mark Rusgrand is here, and some of his group's research synthesized some of the evidence from Kenya. Smallholders have certain practices or certain technologies that can lead to win-win-win. Productivity increase, smallholders' income, and to help mitigate the climate change. The problem is incentives. Why smallholders would adopt that sort of win-win technologies? The second is the capacity. Do they have the capacity to do that? So incentive capacity are some of the challenges for smallholders to adopt win-win-win practices, technologies. Now, the status of women is so critical in poverty reduction, and particularly in reduction of malnutrition. If a woman has higher status, if a woman can allocate household's budget, most likely that woman can feed their children better with nutritious food. In fact, in India, there's a distinct between agricultural growth and reduction in malnutrition. One of the major factors is the status of women. The distinct, obviously there are other factors, but the woman's status is one of the factors behind the distinct.
Okay, well then we'll move to the next round and focus some questions on this side of the room. So I've seen 3 already, so we'll start 1, 2, and 3 in the back. Thank you.
My name is Iftikhar Mustafa from the CGIAR. Thank you very much for this very excellent document and a presentation. I would like to focus a little bit on the private sector. Schengen, you mentioned about the private sector, and Mary, you mentioned about the prices and so on. And I would like to address the private sector, not necessarily from a big company, but from a farmer, private farmer who wants to have incentives and so on. So my question really is, in terms of looking at the private sector from the farmer's point of view, have you looked at, are you considering looking at the farm profitability, looking at the drivers of farm profitability? Because at the end of the day, if, as you just mentioned, that some of the challenges are getting incentives, unless you have that kind of mechanism in place, it will be quite a bit of a challenge to get that incentives and entrepreneurial behavior in the private farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
I'm Karen Brooks from IFPRI, and I thank you for some very interesting comments. I think that our ability to run the walk, run the talk, whatever, and to do it at the speed and in the direction that we need to depends a lot on the price of greenhouse gases, particularly the price of carbon. We've had a lot of talk about externalities, how do we internalize them? A lot of those are related to the incentive regime and how we think about greenhouse gases in an agricultural context, and that relates to the pricing of carbon, methane, whatever. Andrew, you've been giving so much thought to this over the years. Can you give us any insights into where we are now and how we should think about that in the years ahead?
Thank you, Karen. And then one from the back.
I'm Manfred Zeller from the University of Hohenheim and a visiting fellow with IFPRI and Harvest Plus. It's these events that I cherish while I'm here. My question relates to total factor productivity. We learned today that it has accelerated again, especially in developing countries, the growth in total factor productivity in the last 2 decades. But we learned also today that agriculture is contributing to climate change and obviously uses non-renewable water such as groundwater, and also contributes through land use change to loss of biodiversity. All these 3 constraints that I just mentioned will be increasingly binding constraints to overall economic growth, food security, not so much capital and land because of technological progress that might reduce in its importance. And my question is, how far are we in the estimation of total factor productivity in calculating in the use of non-renewable groundwater, in the contribution of agriculture to climate change, and the contribution of agriculture to the irreversible reduction of biodiversity?
Thank you. So we'll turn the questions over to the panel. First one on farm profitability, one specifically for Andrew on the price of carbon, and then the last one on how far are we in estimating total factor productivity, in calculating the use of non-renewable water, agriculture and climate change, and whatnot. So.
Well, I'm start and a couple of responses. In terms of farm profitability, I think I'd point you to the 2012 State of Food and Agriculture report by FAO that came out towards the end of the year, and they measured investment in agriculture, and really they're the first time try and look at how much investment is made by farmers. And it's you can imagine if you think about land and buildings and machinery, it's the overwhelming share of global investment in agriculture. So I think that reinforces the comment you made about looking at incentives for farmers, not just to undertake individual year decisions, but to invest in fertility of the land and other innovations. And really, we have a lot of work about what makes U.S. farms profitable that I'd be happy to point you to. A final comment on water. I think this is a really important point in looking at productivity. And at ERS, we've launched a major effort on trying to incorporate water into measurements of total factor productivity, including some collaboration with IFPRI in doing this. And we'd be happy to share what we're doing, maybe engage other people. It's a big undertaking, but we think it is critical.
Andrew? greenhouse gas emission?
Well, well, the current price of carbon is not doing too well, and that's simply because it's like any price is determined by supply and demand, and Europe is generating 88% of all the carbon trade originations, and its goals are too easy at the moment. So to get to 20% reduction for Europe is pretty easy, and therefore nobody really needs to buy so many carbon credits. And there's also various other complicated technical issues relating to hot air. So the price might be $5 a ton, or 5 to 10 or less. That's not going to do anything really. So you want to start at, say, $25 would be a good one. I think the Obama administration, I think, has a sort of shadow price of 22 they came up with or something. But we should be, you've talked to Nick Stern, I'm sure he'd be up in the sort of $50, $60 a ton. But it's like, you know, if you've got a 400-pound man, I mean, we just want to reduce weight. In other words, $25 would be a great place to start. I mean, we may eventually have to go up, you know, higher. But, you know, you think about a $25 a ton, that would put $25 on a round trip airfare from here to London. I mean, is that enough to start changing behavior? Well, I don't know. But I tell you, $25 a ton, exactly back to the point that we were making on the climate smart that Chris was making, would start changing things. And the beauty of the example in Kenya, where for the first time ever, these farmers are actually getting paid for this triple win agriculture, they only get $10 a ton. Actually, that's not why they do it. It's not for the cash. It's because it's just a nice bonus for them, and they're actually engaging. They're very excited. I've been there and met them. These guys get climate change. These are poor farmers in Kenya, where first time ever they're receiving carbon. If you increased it to $35 a ton, my goodness, you'd start seeing some real changes.
Okay. Now let me add to the private sector issue. I'm in the process of writing a report. How can we convert subsistence smallholders to profitable businesses? I think right now it's a great opportunity for smallholders to become profitable. That's because higher food prices and lots of opportunities are there, but they're also facing some challenges. For example, the price volatility. The price volatility they are facing. So the smallholders cannot afford the market risks. So how can we help them to reduce the market risks? So their access to capital, I think many have mentioned about the capital. Yes, the amount total agriculture investment, farmers actually account for 70–80%. So critical there. Now on the TFP, I very much agree that right now the current TFP, the total factor productivity, usually do not include water as an input, do not include environmental impact as an externality or negative output. I think in the future we needed to do that. The green TFP or TFP that really take into consideration of all social aspects, not just the economic impacts on the ground. In fact, I was one of the first researchers trying to include water irrigation as an input in TFP, and that actually makes a difference. So water in many countries accounts for a big share of the total input. So we need to do more on that.
Okay. Well, I think our time's up unless anyone has one very last burning question, but we are a bit over, so I don't want to keep you from the rest of your days. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, for all of your questions, and then a big thanks to the panelists. Thank you.